Here's a regular thing I hear from women. They're told they're way too emotional in the workplace. Funny that, because I've never known a man get that kind of feedback. I want to ask you a question actually before we get into the detail. What emotions sprang to mind when you thought of the woman and then the man? I'll bet it was getting upset or crying for the woman and being far too aggressive for the man. Am I right? But let's start with the obvious stuff here for a minute. Now, humans are emotional creatures. We're designed that way, and it's a good thing. It should be celebrated. I'm a huge advocate for bringing emotion back to the workplace. Things have gone too far. You know, I walk into corporate offices these days and see zombies, clones of each other. Clinical dead space with no vibe or atmosphere. There's no fire in anyone's belly. Everyone's too wrapped up in their own introverted energy, not wanting to be seen as the one that's a little bit different. There's a desire to conform, to blend in. It's great, it's boring, and it's got no soul. It's considered wrong to have any emotion or even half a personality. Now, who wants to work in a culture like that? So, for clarity, when I talk about emotions today, I want you to recognise that it's not exclusive or limited to the ones I have already mentioned, nor in that context. So think about the vast array of emotions that can be experienced and demonstrated by anybody, regardless of gender. From anger, frustration and confusion to excitement, elation, nervousness, or even shame, humiliation or embarrassment. Let's start with the good news. Generally speaking, women are more emotionally intelligent than men. And this means that you can see this as an opportunity rather than a limitation or threat. So let's begin with shifting that mindset. As women, we're more intuitive. We sense things more. We're naturally more present. We notice things, especially the unsaid. And there's a big gaping hole in business and society that's crying out for someone to step in and hold that space. So let's take it. Trust your natural instincts and your capabilities and own it. Use this as your competitive advantage. I'll guarantee if you're able to shift your mindset in this way, you will naturally start to behave differently and you'll already get immediate results. Many people, not just women, men included, do struggle when it comes to handling conflict, confrontation and challenge. It tends to trigger people's fight or flight response because they see it as a threat. Similarly, to my point above, progress starts with a mindset shift, and that shift is learning to see an opportunity rather than a threat. And to do that means becoming more curious, to get out of your own head and into theirs, asking yourself the question, what's going on for them right now, and how can I best serve them in order to serve myself? It's metaphorically moving from facing each other across a table position to standing side by side and walking along beside them position. When you're able to do this, you'll avoid your own amygdala hijack, meaning that you minimise the release of cortisol and adrenaline in your body that's inhibiting cognitive function and decision-making capability. So that's a good shout at this point. In handling confrontation, conflict and challenge, there are some really practical approaches and techniques that you can use in order to come out the other side with your credibility firmly intact. The biggest tip I will offer you is to completely avoid using the phrase, I disagree. Why? Because it's like adding fuel to the flames, and you know it. Because you'll likely have had your fingers burnt before, or you've at least witnessed it. Instead, with your curiosity still engaged, listen first. Listen purely to understand, not to prepare your next response or anticipating the moment they draw breath that gives you a gap in airtime to jump in. Clarify that you understand them fully, then offer to share an alternative viewpoint. So it might sound something like this. Okay, it's useful to hear the situation from your perspective. So can I just check I've completely understood you? Do you clarify him? Okay, so I can see where you're coming from. I've actually got a bit of a different viewpoint that's important that it's considered. Can I share that with you? That's the assertive response. It leads with consideration and listening, but follows through with courage. Notice also that it's not focused on the people involved, you or I. It's focused on what's important. Now, you might still get quite a confrontational response to that. When you do, manage yourself carefully. Keep your influence intact. And you can do this by ensuring you respond proactively rather than react in the moment. When we react, we do so based on moods, feelings, and circumstance, and that's a recipe for disaster. When we press the pause button and respond, we're able to do so based on principles and desired results. So in this example, my recommendation is that you move to a position of personal boundaries with a little bit of feedback. State your intent first and make sure that your intent is clean and good. So for example, I want this project to be a success just as much as you do. Follow that with specifics about the behaviour that you find unacceptable and the impact that it has on you. Shouting at me in that way is not okay. I actually find it intimidating and that's not going to help me to be my best. It's unacceptable. Please stop it. Then zip it. Even if that means a bit of an awkward tumbleweed moment, don't get sucked into filling the black hole of silence with waffle. Let it hang. It's doing its job. It's powerful. Just hold the space for the other person to respond. Your job is just to continue to care and let that show on your face. Now that should do the trick and you'll likely get a shift at that moment, maybe even an apology. But if not, it is time to take control and end the conversation for some cooling off time. Feel free and feel well within your rights to say, I don't wish to continue the conversation at this point and I won't be spoken to in this way. I think it's best we take a break and reflect. What is important here though is that you do follow up. Don't leave the ball in their court. Go back, call or send a message, maybe later that day or the following day to discuss it. My last tip is specifically linked to managing your emotions. I've helped lots of menopausal women actually deal with situations like this with great success. They're almost scared of their own emotions and reactions and don't trust themselves to be able to stay in control. Here's a really simple technique to help with this. It starts with being able to recognise and label the emotion that you're experiencing and where you feel it in your body. So for example, worry in your tummy, anger in your chest, excitement or nervousness in your veins, frustration in your head. Once you can spot an emotion and know what it is, the trick is to describe it rather than demonstrate it. This prevents you from having an outburst, but doesn't mean you have to leave your emotions at the door. You could be in a meeting and feel very frustrated at the lack of progress. You might even feel like crying out of that frustration, but if you do, people misread that signal. So instead, you're able to articulate it. This project is significantly behind schedule and it's at risk of going massively over budget. I'm extremely frustrated and cross right now about the lack of accountability in this team. That clearly states where you're at without going batshit crazy or being labelled an emotional wreck. If you're experiencing brain fog as a menopausal symptom and you're being challenged with lots of questions by stakeholders, take control and own it by saying, okay, I'd like some time to reflect and consider my thoughts to be sure that I give you the right recommendation so that we land this change successfully. So I will come back to you by lunchtime on that. There are many more strategies in my toolkit to deal with situations like this. These are just my favourite top 3. If you'd like to learn more and develop some more of the skills to handle these situations with ease, with influence and with credibility, then add yourself to the waitlist to be first to receive details of my autumn run of Woman Up, my 8-week group coaching program.